Hi, and welcome back to Waveform Science. I'm your host, Jeff Hagan. Behind me today, we have a B300K battery that Bluetti is in process of releasing. We're going to take a look at it and figure out where it fits into the product line and determine if it works. But first off, the theory behind the battery. The B300K battery is a more economical line battery. So pricing is a significant concern in Bluetti's mind when they're making this battery. The pricing market of batteries in general has been going down. In fact, going down somewhat dramatically. If you've looked for the last couple of years, you can get solar generators for a third of the cost of what they cost 3 years ago for the same capacity. And they're working on the expansion batteries now because a significant limitation of the larger solar generators, specifically the modular ones, is that the batteries themselves are using, shall we say, older technology that costs more to manufacture. So their goal here is to make a cheaper battery with darn near large capacity. So this is nearly a 3,000 watt hour battery. It's a 2,764 watt hour battery. So 300 watt hours or so shy of 3 kilowatt hours. It's not the same size as the other two larger Bluetti batteries, the B300 and the B300S, and that's because they've changed the battery technology. They're still using lithium iron phosphate, which is good because that's the technology they should be using. But instead of using round battery cells, they're using what's called prismatic or square battery cells. And that gives you a space advantage. There's a trade-off between cooling and space. The round ones have basically air between the cells, so you can cool them off faster. The square ones don't have air, so they're more compact. So that allows the B300K battery to be a lot smaller than the B300S and B300 batteries. You're going to see a B300S and a B300K right next to each other later in the video, so you can compare. But it's quite a bit smaller. And because of pricing concerns, they've removed a bunch of ports as well, which also, by the way, makes the battery smaller. It doesn't have a solar controller built in. In fact, it has no way to recharge it, except for plugging it into a head unit. That's it. There's no way to do it. It doesn't have the output ports. It doesn't have a USB-C port on it. There's no cigarette lighter port in the front. But again, that makes the battery smaller and it makes it cheaper. So if you're a person who's looking for an expansion battery and you don't need an extra solar controller on your battery, or you don't need a cigarette lighter port on the battery itself, that 3,000 watt battery with a cigarette lighter port on it. If you don't need that, then the B300K is probably a good option. So let's dive into it and take a look at it. Before we do, by the way, just the standard disclaimer: this B300K battery was sent by Bluetti for review purposes. So I didn't buy this. I couldn't buy it, actually. It's not out yet. There was no way I could get a hold of it at this point if they didn't send it to me for review. Bluetti does not pay me to do review videos. I make no money off these. If you look at the YouTube channel, you will notice that I do not have monetization turned on. In other words, I'm not making money off YouTube either. I do this as a hobby. I do it because it's fun. I don't do this for money. Some, but not all of the products you're going to see in the video today were provided by Bluetti for review purposes. Many of them were not provided by Bluetti because I do spend money on their stuff. They don't just send me everything. I got to buy stuff. So a few of the items you're going to see were review units. But at the same time, I bought some stuff too. So is this a sponsored video? Well, maybe-ish, kind of. I don't make money off of it, so not really. So that's kind of my answer there, is not really. I don't make any money off this. So what's in the box with the B300K battery? Well, first off, of course, you have the instruction manual. And you have what Bluetti calls a P090D to P090D. This is their 90 amp version. Pull this off so you guys can actually read it. Oh, it doesn't say on there. Okay, well, this is the 90 amp version cable. And this cable is used on the AC200 Max, the AC200L, and the AC300. And, of course, the side of the battery. If you're going to plug this into an AC500, you need the converter cable, which is a different cable, which we will show later. And that's what's in the box. That's it. There's no AC charging brick because there's no place to charge it in. There's no solar cables because there's no place to plug them in. There's no other cables in there except for this expansion cable. So if you're going to buy one of these, make sure you have something that you're going to plug it into. And we're going to cover that in some detail momentarily. Let's do a quick introduction of the physical parts on the B300K battery. First off, the front of the battery itself. We have a power button, which is a different power button than anything Bluetti's ever used before. It does have a good feel to it when you press it down. Press and hold for a minute and it turns on. You've got 5 lights to indicate the battery status. And there is a fan that kicks on for a second as it first turns on and then turns back off. It turns back off again. There is a single USB-A port here. And interestingly, that is the only port on here that is end user accessible. All the rest of them are locked down for just Bluetti's connectors. But the USB port here is marked 12 watt port on the front of the port. It is not marked quick charge. It specs out as a old style 12 watt port. It does not spec out as a quick charge port, interestingly. So if you've got a cell phone, it is not going to fast charge off this port. And you can pull 12 watts from it for what it's worth. Back to the battery on itself, the only thing else on the front of the battery is just the name, B300K, and 2764.8 watt hours is what this one says it's at. Let's move to the side. We have 2 battery expansion ports. Just like the B300S and the B300 has 2 expansion ports. These ports, however, are rotated 90 degrees from each other, which does make it a little bit more convenient to plug the cable in because you don't have to actually rotate the cable around itself when the unit is stacked directly on top of the battery. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Let's rotate around to the back. New feature on this one, we've got 4 bolt holes on the back of the battery. That is for bolting the battery down in a vehicle. There are certain countries now, I've been told, I'm not in one of them, the US isn't one of them, but there are certain countries that are requiring the batteries to be bolted down in an RV. So these are where your bolting points are. These are M5 metric bolts. The length depends on what you bolt it to, really. How thick is the thing you're bolting it to? However, these bolt holes are on the back of the battery, not on the bottom of the battery. And it is not safe, according to Bluetti, to turn the battery on its side to put the bolt holes on the bottom. So do be aware you're actually bolting it to a horizontal surface, a vertical surface, not a horizontal surface. So you're going to have to concoct something when you bolt it together. The next side of the battery is where you would normally expect solar inputs and charging inputs, but we have nothing. We have a fan hole. There is no solar input on this battery. So this really is just an expansion battery. This is not a power station on its own. Why? Because there's actually no way to recharge this without plugging it into a head unit. All of Bluetti's other expansion batteries up until this point were standalone power stations on their own, given the fact that they didn't have an inverter in them. But they had a way to recharge. They had a way to store power from solar. And they had a way to give you that power and use it in some useful way, which in most cases didn't include AC from the batteries itself. They just had DC outputs. But at the same time, this thing has no way to recharge itself. So if you bring just the battery, it doesn't help you that much. You really need something to plug this into. And yes, you do have one USB-A port on it, but it's not really practical to recharge your phone from a 2700 watt hour battery with no way to recharge the battery. But that's the ports. I mean, that's really it. You've got a button, you've got a USB-A port, and you've got 2 battery expansion ports, and that's it. That's what this has. The B300K battery weighs in at 63.5 pounds, according to my scale. The specs from the manufacturer are 65 pounds, so this unit actually weighs a tiny bit less than what they spec'd it out at. There's usually a little bit of difference there. As far as energy density by weight compared to the other battery expansion modules, that would be the watt hours of the battery divided by the weight of the battery, in which case the B300K at a value of 42.5, by the way, higher numbers are better, is almost, but not quite as good as the B230. That is still the king of energy density by weight, but is actually very good. And why is it very good? Because it doesn't have a solar controller in it, and it doesn't have a recharging circuit in it, so they don't need as much weight in there. The physical dimensions of the B300K are, my tape measure says, about 20 inches this way, about 8.5-ish, and about 12 inches this direction. Official specifications say 20.6 by 12.87 by 8.23, which is about what I got. That gives us a volume in cubic feet of 1.3 cubic feet. And if you take the energy density, in other words, the watt hour of the battery, divide that by the volume in cubic feet to figure out how much energy you get per cubic unit. In this particular case, larger numbers are better. You wind up getting a very similar number to the B230 and a higher number than anything else. And this, of course, does make sense because this battery has less in it. There's no charger built in, there's no solar controller built in, there's no ports on it, therefore they can devote more space to the battery. Additionally, they use the prismatic cells, the square cells, which have less wasted space. So you wind up with a smaller, denser battery. So what solar generators is a B300K compatible with? And yes, this is an AC200 Max, which is the very first power station Bluetti ever released that is compatible with expansion batteries. And yes, these are compatible. It does have the same problem as the B300S though, excuse me, the B300. If I plug the cable in here, Bluetti's cables are not long enough to reach around to the right connector because the connector for the battery is on this side, the connector for the solar generator is on that side. The cable doesn't reach. I don't know why they did that. They just need to make the cable about 1.5 feet longer and then it would reach, but they didn't. So let's move this around. Plugging in the external battery to the AC200 Max is exactly the same as the other external batteries that plug into it because it's the same connector. There's two of them on here. One faces this way and the other one faces 180 degrees the other direction, this way. That's actually kind of nice because then the little lock tabs are sort of protected toward the middle. Lessens the chance of you accidentally bumping them off. But it doesn't matter which port you use, one or the other. Just plug one in. And then you have to remember to turn this lock tab on. If you don't turn the lock tab on, then it's not going to actually power the unit, even though the plug is plugged in. So plugging it in is not sufficient. You also have to hit the little locking tab button. And for the AC200 Max, the configuration here, if you have two batteries, is you'd plug one battery into the AC200 Max, and if you had a second battery, you'd plug the second battery directly into the side of the AC200 Max. Don't plug a second battery into the other port, not on the AC200 Max anyway. If you do, what'll happen is it just won't find the battery. It won't break anything, it just won't find it. Powering it on with the AC200 Max is similar to powering it on with other batteries in that when you turn on the head unit, the AC200 Max powers on, it boots, and then you'll notice it has not yet found the battery. That's because the external battery over here doesn't automatically turn on with the main unit. You have to turn it on separately. That is in fact a limitation of the AC200 Max itself, and it's true with all the batteries as far as I know. I haven't tested the B300, but the B230 and the B300K both will not automatically power on with the head unit. And it doesn't matter how the head unit turns on. You can turn it on with solar, and that doesn't turn it on either. And there is no solar input on the battery, so there's no way to remote trigger this battery turning on. So that's sort of a downside about using this one with the AC200 Max, is there's no way to get the battery to turn on automatically, similar to the B230. But really, that's not a limitation of the battery. That's a limitation of the AC200 Max. That being said, it does turn off on its own. If I power off the main unit, the battery turns off too. So it can power it off, it just can't power it on. Next up, does the B300K discharge and charge with the main unit? I mean, it should. It finds it as a battery. I would be very surprised if it doesn't. But let's run a quick little test here just to make sure. All right, we've run it for about half an hour at about 1500 watts. And let's take a look at the two batteries. In the middle here, the internal battery is at 83, the external battery is at 81. Interestingly, despite the fact that the two batteries are a different size, it's doing a reasonable job of keeping them together. Common misconception here, people think that the batteries are going to stay exactly the same. They don't. It's normal, especially in the cases where the batteries are two different sizes. So that exacerbates the problem. But did seem to draw from both batteries, kind of as we expect. Next, we're going to plug it in, recharge it, and see how that works. Let's take a look here. 100%. Internal battery, external battery. So in fact, yes, it does recharge both batteries together, kind of as we would expect. Next up, we have something new and different. You'll see I have a B300K battery here and a B230 hooked up to my AC200 Max at the same time. In other words, I'm using two different kinds of batteries on the same unit. For the AC200 Max, this hasn't been allowed. The support has been telling people it doesn't work. In fact, it actually doesn't work. If you mix a B230 and a B300, the SOC meter in the AC200 Max becomes incredibly confused because it assumes the two batteries are the same capacity. This has been fixed when using a B300K. So there's no issue with using a B300K and another battery at the same time together, and we're going to verify that by doing a quickie discharge-recharge cycle with a B300K and a B230 on the same machine at the same time. All right, we are at 82% it looks like. Let's look at the three batteries. 80%, 82%, 84%. So the battery that is the lowest is the B230. The B300K, which is, by the way, battery number 3 in this particular case. The numbering is kind of random. You have to unplug the batteries to figure out which is which. But in this case, the B300K is at number 3. And the internal battery is always number 1. So they're plus or minus the same-ish. I don't expect them to be exactly the same. It actually would be really hard for the BMS to keep them exactly the same with different sized batteries attached. But they do kind of all seem to be going down at the same rate-ish. So yeah, that seems to work. Let's charge it all back up and just make sure they all charge together. As an interesting aside, Bluetti has informed me that they will shortly be supporting both 1 and 2 battery configurations of the new B210 battery on the AC200 Max. Using the B210 battery with the AC200 Max does require the purchase of the P090D to aviation converter cable, 1 cable per battery, by the way, in this particular case, in order for the battery to physically plug into the AC200 Max. In addition to beginning to support the B210 battery in conjunction with the AC200 Max, Bluetti is also supporting a mixed mode configuration that consists of a B300K battery and a B210 battery, 2 different batteries again, both plugged into the AC200 Max at the same time. We will this time skip the charge-discharge routine, as I'm sure you guys believe me now that they do actually charge and discharge together. We don't have to show that for every combination, or this video is going to be super long. Additionally, by the way, this didn't need any special firmwares. We are using the public firmware for the AC200 Max. It's up to date as of today. But there's nothing special. They didn't send me a secret firmware for this video. So if you've got a B210 battery and you have the right connector, you could plug it into your AC200 Max and it should work today. The B300K battery will work on the AC200 Max from launch day. So there's no special firmware magic here. This is all being done straight off the stock firmware. In addition to this, Bluetti is supporting a mixed mode operation of B300K and B300 batteries, which you see here. I haven't changed the battery since the last scene because I don't have a B300 battery. They're out of them right now. They don't have one to send me for the video, so they're not showing up for a little bit. So folks have noticed they're out of stock right now. I think they are sending more of them in, just they don't have one right now for me to test with. So I can't actually show that configuration, but they do tell me it will be supported. And of course you could use 2 of the B300K batteries. They only sent me 1 for the review video, so I don't have the ability to show 2 of them. But those are supported configurations as well with the AC200 Max. All right, now we can finally move on to something a little bit more modern and get those charging bricks off of my table. So why did I spend so much time on the AC200 Max? For folks that don't remember, the AC200 Max was the very first power station Bluetti released that supported external batteries. It is, at this point, fairly older as far as the units go. It does not charge anywhere near as fast as the new units. It has less solar available, so why did I start the video with that? Very simple. Bluetti's management has decided to have their engineers support the older stuff. And that's kind of a hard decision, and I applaud them for that. Make the old stuff work is not a common decision in a fast-moving industry like this. So if you're considering between different solar generator companies, the fact that they chose to keep support for AC200 Max on their new battery, it kind of says something about the culture at Bluetti, and it says that they're going to support you for the long run. So I am personally impressed by the fact that they chose to make it work on the AC200 Max and didn't just abandon the platform and move on. Because these solar generators, they last, 10 years for the batteries? So everybody that bought one, I mean, they've only been out for, 4 years now? So everyone that bought one still has it working. So excellent work, Bluetti, on keeping the old stuff supported by the new batteries. But that being said, let's move on to the new stuff, AC200L. The AC200L supports either a single B230 battery, because the AC200L only has one port on it and the B230 only has one port on it. That combination doesn't have a battery port that's not connected to anything. So if you get the B230, you can only use one with the AC200L. It also supports a combination of the B210 batteries, either one of them or two of them. It also supports the B300 batteries, which I don't have. Again, either one or two of them. And it supports, of course, now the B300K battery as well. One or two, I only have one. And it supports the mixed mode between a B300K battery and a B300 battery. And lastly, it also supports, interestingly, either one or two of the B300S batteries that is usually would pair up with an AC500. In order to do the B300S batteries, you have to use the converter cable, and you have to contact Bluetti to get a special firmware. But I have been told that Bluetti, in the firmware that they released that goes along with the B300K for the AC200L, when that firmware comes out, that's going to support both the B300K mixed mode and the B300S battery. So at that point, that firmware will no longer be by special request only. Everybody will be able to do that. Next up is the AC300. Up until now, this has officially only been compatible with the B300 battery and no other batteries. It does not work with the B300S. But you can see here I have it plugged into a B300K. Let's see if it works. Turn it on here. Give it a moment to boot. And it makes a beeping noise. And momentarily fires an alarm for a DAMCU warning. And then the alarm clears and goes away. This is on the publicly available firmware. I don't have any test versions of firmware on here. This is likely an issue that Bluetti is going to fix by pushing out a firmware. But it doesn't seem to affect functionality. You can charge it, you can discharge it, it seems to work fine. But it just fires an alarm when it first turns on. And then the alarm goes away and it just works. So they're going to fix this. But if you get one of these on launch day, understand you're going to want to check your AC300 for firmware updates around-ish the time that you plug it in. And if later on, if you buy an AC300 and you don't buy any B300 batteries, you only buy a B300K battery, it'll work. And it works, by the way, on older versions of the firmware, but it does throw an alarm when you first turn it on, but it otherwise works fine. You can use up to 4 B300K batteries with an AC300, and you can mix and match, and I don't have a B300 to show you, but you can mix and match any combination of B300Ks and B300 batteries. I recommend keeping the connectors symmetrical, meaning like, let's say you have 2 B300 batteries and 2 B300K batteries. I would put the B300K batteries closer to the AC300. In other words, I'd have an AC300 going into a B300K where that's going into a B300, and do that on both ports. So don't put the B300s on one port and the B300Ks on the other port. I would keep the ports symmetrical. They're slightly different capacities, and you'll wind up with issues where the batteries aren't discharging at the right rates unless they're plugged in symmetrically. So try to keep them symmetrical. But other than that, you can mix and match now. And that's new to the AC300 because prior it only worked with one type of battery. All right, moving on. AC500. Is the AC500 compatible with the B300K? Well, I have one hooked up here and it's turned on, so obviously yes. In fact, more so, you can use mixed mode of any combination of B300S batteries and B300K batteries up to 6 batteries at the same time. Not 6S's and 6Ks, but a total of 6 batteries between 300S and 300K. If you want to put some B300 batteries into the mix, you can do that too. You can put any number of B300s, B300K, and B300S batteries, which I can't demo because I don't have the B300s. But then when you add a B300 into the mix, your maximum number of batteries goes down to 4. Because the B300 battery itself doesn't support any more than that. Officially supported by Bluetti anyway. So that's your limitations there. So what are we going to do with this? I'm going to do some discharge and recharge testing. Let's see how efficient this is. The B300K battery, we'll do a single discharge and then recharge it back up at a fast rate. Let's get all that hooked up and get it going. All right, the battery on the AC500 is now completely discharged. And let's see what we got. We got a meter reading of 2.455 kilowatt hours or 2455 watt hours. Divide that by the capacity of the battery, 2764.8, and we get 88.7% efficiency. That is only a single data point, by the way. I usually do more data points. This chart has the AC500 and the AC200 Max on it. And I didn't do it this time. Why not? Simply timing. I didn't have the battery for long enough. It's going to take at least a month, maybe a month and a half of real-world time to actually do this level of discharge testing. And that's not including other tests. That's just the discharge testing. And Bluetti just didn't give me enough time to get it done. That's really all it is. Almost certainly I'm going to go through and finish doing the discharge testing later on so that I have the data. So if we do another comparison later on, we can actually compare that data. But at the same time, you know, just timing. That's how it works. But that being said, if we look at the 1,000-watt line here, the AC500 with a B300S battery gets 87.46%, and with the B300K battery gets 88.7%. Basically identical. So the power usage internally to the head unit, of course, is going to be the same between the two readings. The same-ish anyway. I've updated the firmware on this device, but it is the same physical piece of hardware that I benchmarked before. So any sort of oddities about this particular piece of hardware would be the same between the two readings. As far as the power usage internally for the battery, well, it's two different batteries. We're comparing a B300S to a B300K, but the numbers are near identical. So we definitely do not have a huge efficiency hit moving from a B300S to a B300K. Of course, not including the fact that the B300K has a lower peak output itself, meaning that you need 2 of them to hit the full max wattage on the AC500. And the fact that the B300K doesn't have the solar controller on it, which we talked about earlier. B300Ks, if you build an AC500 unit with just B300Ks, you lose out on the ability to add more solar to each battery. With B300S, you can add more solar, but of course there's definitely a price to pay for that. B300K is a significantly cheaper battery than the B300S, so your choice on that one. If you don't need the extra solar, you can save a bunch of bucks by not having to buy the parts. All right, I've got the power cable hooked back up here. Very good. Next, we're going to do a recharge. So we're going to charge this up as fast as we can. Bluetti tells me that's the 30 amp setting on the AC500. We're going to see how long that takes. I will point out that I usually do charging efficiency testing. We're not going to do that this time because the charger is in the AC500 head unit itself, which is the same head unit that we already did efficiency testing on for the B300S battery in my AC500 video. There is no point to retest the charger with a different battery because the charging efficiency is not going to change based on which battery is plugged into the charger. But we are going to test how long does it take to charge, and can it handle a full 0% to 100% charge at the absolute max rate that Bluetti tells me it's safe to charge it at. All right, we've just finished the recharge test on the B300K AC500 combo, and if you can hear, there's a fan running in the battery. Let me put my microphone over there next to it. That fan is in the battery itself, not in the AC500 head unit. So let's see how loud that noise is. 45, 46 decibels. So definitely audible. Not annoying, I would say. It doesn't rise to that level, but you can definitely hear it. The fan is going to be a little bit louder than the B300S, which as far as I can tell doesn't either has a fan in it or I've never gotten the fan to turn on, one of the two. The AC500 itself has a fan, and during the recharge test, the fan in the AC500 was significantly louder than the fan in the battery. Honestly, I didn't even notice the battery had a fan in it until after the recharge test was done, and the AC500 fan turned off, but the B300 fan, or the B300K fan, stayed on. So we've got it fully charged here. How long did the charge test take? Right about an hour. 1 hour and 32 seconds, to be exact, on this particular test. And that was a 30 amp rate, peaking out at about 3,500-ish watts is what we saw earlier. And, you know, that's about what we expect. That's a 1C rate. That's going from the battery either completely full or completely dead to the opposite, either completely full or completely dead in about an hour. And that's what most solar generators get. So very happy that it does, in fact, do that. You do need a large power source to be able to handle that. Bluetti does call out that despite the AC500, you can actually set the charge rate even faster than that. The AC500, you can set it to 50 amps. But it's not safe to set it higher than 30 amps with one single battery attached. You need two batteries to set it faster than that, because the battery itself can't handle it. The limitation is actually on the connector right here in the battery. It can handle 90 amps. So one connector cannot handle 5,000 watts. It just can't do it. You need two different batteries on there. So we've shown a number of different solar generators plugging into the B300K battery. In fact, so many of them that it's not practical to just memorize them all. So I made this handy infographic chart and confirmed with Bluetti's tech support teams that this chart is in fact correct, so at least as of today. Might change in the future. But this chart covers not only the B300K, but every battery Bluetti makes, the expansion ones, and every solar generator where the batteries are natively compatible. In other words, I'm not listing all the ones that just use daisy chaining, but natively compatible. So in the case of the AC200 Max, you can use mixed mode. That's the first column here, is mixed mode is allowed, yes or no. And I'm going to skip the AC60. That's really a discussion for another video that, by the way, we've already made. And AC200 Max mixed mode, yes, supports one or two batteries. And the important thing with mixed mode on the AC200 Max is if you're going to mix the modes, one of the two batteries has to be a B300K. So if you can have a battery where two types don't match, one of those two has to be a B300K. The other one can be anything you want. Or you can use one or two B230s, where they are both the same battery. You can use one or two B210 batteries, where it needs that converter cable. You can use one or two B300 batteries. Doesn't need converter cables there. And you can use one or two B300K batteries, and you can have two B300K batteries that match. Not compatible at all with the B300S. AC200L, you can do mixed mode, but the only way you can do mixed mode is one B300 and one B300K. So outside of that one combination of a B300 and a B300K, they all have to match for any other combination. So not going to work with a B80, obviously not for native mode anyway. You can do a one B230. We covered that. The B230 only has one port on it. There's no way to physically plug in a second one. You can do one or two B210s. Again, needs that converter cable. But in this case, unlike the AC200 Max, it only needs one converter cable, not two. For B300, you can use one or two. For B300K, you can use one or two. And for B300S, you can use one or two. So interestingly, the AC200L is compatible with all of their 51.2 volt native internal battery voltage batteries. The B80 internally is a 22 something volt, if I remember correctly. It's a different voltage, so that's why that one's not natively compatible. But the AC200L has the highest compatibility of anything they've made, as you can see. AC240 is really only compatible with the B210 that was designed to go with it. That's because the AC240 is water resistant and the B210 is water resistant. And if you plug a non-water resistant battery into a water resistant power station, what's the point of paying extra money for the water resistance on the power station if you're just going to use a not water resistant battery? So it's sort of, it only works with the one battery they have that actually does that. And interestingly, the B300K cannot be connected to the AC240 at all in any way. There's no way to connect those two. So that doesn't work. AC300, yes, you can use a mixed mode of any combination of B300 and B300K batteries, up to 4 batteries total. It's only compatible with the B300 and the B300K. And those are the only ones you can use. Can't use B330s, can't use B210s, can't use B300Ss. Just B300s and B300Ks. AC500, you can use a mixed combination of B300S and B300K up to 6. If you add a B300 battery into the mix, for a mix of B300S, B300K, and B300, now you can only use 4. Limitation on the B300 battery, at least what support tells me. And that's their official support numbers there. So the B300 native, you can use 1 or 4 of them. The B300K batteries, you can use 1 to 6 of them. Both of those need a P150D to P90D cable converter, and you actually only need 1 of those cable converters per input on the AC500. And the suggestion here is, since it's got 2 battery inputs, you want to make those 2 battery inputs as symmetrical as possible. So let's say you've got a B300 and a B300K times 2. So you've got 2 B300s and 2 B300Ks. You want to plug those into your AC500. What you'd want to do there is put 1 B300K onto each input and 1 B300 onto each input. So each input would have a string that contains of the input going to a B300K, then going to a B300 in that order. So you don't actually only need 1 of those converter cables per input, not 1 per battery. So if you got 6 batteries, you don't have to go order 6 of those converter cables. So you need at most 2. And of course, you can use 1 to 6 B300S batteries with the AC500 because that was what it was originally designed for. Let's look at the same data another way, which is the actual compatibility, the actual specs of the battery. So here's the sort of the cheat sheet of what you get. And I didn't put cost on here. For the B300K, a significant advantage is that it's going to be a really less expensive battery for the amount of capacity that you get. But it doesn't make sense, in my opinion, to put the price on this chart because the price is constantly changing. That would make this chart out of date really fast. There are already other folks that do tracking on pricing, and they do, honestly, a better job of that than I would be able to do, so let's just leave that alone. Everything Bluetti makes, except, we're going to start at the lower right corner here, everything Bluetti makes except the B300K can be standalone recharged. What that means is recharging it without the use of a head unit. B300K can't do that. Again, it's a pricing thing. Can you put it in power bank mode? The B80, the B230, and the B300 have power bank mode. The newer batteries, the B210, the B300S, and the B300K don't have power bank mode. That's been removed for reasons. I don't really have a good answer as to why that's been removed. I think it's a really useful feature, really, especially on the B300S. I think it's needed there. But they don't have the cables out to make it work, and the firmware doesn't have it turned on. So it really involves, does Bluetti think they're going to sell enough cables to make it worth the development time to enable the feature in the firmware? Because that's how they make money off the power bank mode, is when people buy the cables. It's really what it's about. As far as output ports, all the batteries have the same output ports, except B300K. All the rest of them, they've got a cigarette lighter port, they've got a USB-A quick charge port, and they've got a USB-C 100 watt power delivery port. B300K, again, for pricing reasons, doesn't have that. Battery port, the compatibility on the battery port, you'll notice the B300K has the most stuff listed there, and that's exactly right. B300K is compatible with everything B300 is, and will be compatible with future models, as Bluetti has said, but I'm not allowed to discuss the future models yet. So we'll find out about those in the future. As far as battery ports, again, has the same battery ports as the B300 for the B300K, and the size is a little bit smaller. Interestingly, the reason the size is smaller is because the batteries themselves are a different physical shape, as we showed in the beginning, which means you're going to fit a different number of them in there, which also leads to why the B300K battery is a little bit more compact. Kind of a good thing. All right, so we've plugged the B300K into pretty much everything I think we can plug it into. We've done a couple of quick tests on it. We haven't done anything really super in-depth just due to the timing requirements on the release date of this video, because it doesn't really make sense to have a launch day video come out 3 weeks after launch. But you know, we've done what we can do. And what do I think of the battery? So the B300K battery is successful in what Bluetti was planning on having it do. It is a economical version battery. That being said, pricing hasn't been announced yet. I have a reasonable idea of what they're going to charge for it, but I don't want to say it in the video in case I'm wrong. They do tend to change the pricing up to the last moment before they release it, so I don't really want to say what they told me until now. But you guys, by the time the video comes out, certainly you'll be able to see what pricing is. And the pricing is going to be extremely competitive for the size of the battery. And that's a good thing. So they will have succeeded at making a cheaper battery for the same size, which really, if you think of the use case for these, that's what most people need. You need a whole lot of battery storage, and you need to not pay a whole lot of money for your battery storage. So they did a good job there. Size and weight, it's more compact. It's physically smaller. It's got bolt down points. That's a nice addition, honestly. The other batteries really needed that. I'm in California where there's earthquakes, and there's not earthquakes all the time, but there's earthquakes sometimes. And one of the reasons I don't have my own personal AC500 station, you know, stacked up like you see in the product videos with the AC500 stacked on a bunch of batteries, is I'm worried the thing's going to fall over in an earthquake. If they had the bolt down points on the B300S batteries, then I could just put a structure behind it and bolt it up, and then I wouldn't have to worry about it falling down. That's actually a really nice feature. I like that. What doesn't it do? Well, it's not a super advanced high-end battery. It doesn't have more solar ports built in. One of the things you can do with the B300S batteries, when you add more batteries, you get more solar. It's got a solar controller built on, B300S has a solar controller built on that does 500 watts, and you can plug a DC charging enhancer into it, which means if you have an AC500 build, every battery you add adds another potential kilowatt of solar, which isn't true with the B300K battery. So you lose out on the additional solar handling capabilities. But most people, my understanding, don't use that feature anyway. It's cool to have, but it's actually also kind of awkward because each battery has 2 different solar controllers on it, which means you have to run 2 different sets of solar wires to each battery. So if you've got 6 batteries, you're having to run 12 pairs of solar wires just to the battery, and then 2 more pairs of solar wire to the head unit to max it out. So you actually wind up needing 14 pairs of solar wires to max the system out if you're going to use that feature. So I don't think it's used that much. And this is a simpler battery. It does what most people need from a battery, and it's a cheaper battery. So it's kind of a good thing. As my standard disclaimer, I am not paid to make these videos. I make no money on these. I do this because it's fun. I do this because I enjoy it, and I do it because people watch the videos and tell me that you guys enjoy it. So as long as you guys keep enjoying the videos, I will continue making them and have fun.